Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, once again, part 3 of a brand new series. As usual, we are digging up the literature left behind by the ancestors. Now, the book we are reading, this book came out in 1817, over 200 years ago. Very rare literature. Now, the reason why I love doing videos like these and content like this, digging up the literature and the writings left behind by the forefathers, is because this is the closest that we get to having a conversation with our predecessors, with our forefathers, with our ancestors, due to the books and the writings and documents and literature they left behind. This is the closest that we get to a conversation, right? So when you see me making these videos, reading the literature of the forefathers and providing my commentary as if I'm having a conversation with the ancestor, this is my favorite type of content to make. It's not my most popular, but it's definitely my favorite content to make. And like I said, this video is going to be a follow-up video to the ones I dropped. If you remember, Haitian Revolutionary debunks French media in 1817, part 1. And then part 2, Haitian Revolutionary destroys the French media in 1817. Now, this book was written by the illustrious ancestor, Baron de Vasty, Vasty the Baron, Baron de Vaté. And of course, he was a high-ranking government official in the Haitian Revolutionary government, the Northern Kingdom. And of course, he was a veteran of the Haitian Revolutionary Wars. And we are getting to sit down and read his writings and pick his brain right now. In part 2, the last part, like I said before, that is probably, if not the most epic video I've ever dropped in the history of my channel. That video was almost an hour long. Now, we're going to get to part 3. Now, where we left off at, the ancestor, essentially, what he was discussing was the idea of the French government demanding a payment or a debt or reparations for the loss of their property. Now, what was their property? According to them, black men, women, and children. Now, of course, the ancestor, if you watch part 2, I don't gotta, rehash it. You already know what he said about that, but we're gonna pick up from that. Bear with me. Bear with me. I'm a little tired right now, but we're gonna get to it, man. We gotta read the literature of the ancestors. So, not wasting no time. Let's continue with part 3. Let's go. The ancient Romans, the Germans, and the Gauls were accustomed to convert the property and the persons of the vanquished to their own use after the victory. It was then by right of conquest, the strongest won the prize. The law of nations in modern times, alike equitable and humane, respects the person and property of the vanquished. Conquest confers no privilege. Claims of sovereignty in war are made with as little mutual evil as possible. We undoubtedly assent to the laws adopted by all civilized nations, but in regard to the ex-colonists, the question is widely different. We are an exception to the rule. There is not a similar example to be found in the annals of nations. We submit our reflections to the political writers of all countries and entreat them to condescend to favor us with their attention on the subject of general law, so interesting and so worthy of engaging a more learned pen than our own. The just gentium of the moderns, now time out, I believe just gentium, I believe that's international law, right? The international law of the moderns does not change the immutable laws of God, of justice and equity. On the contrary, they are its first and most solid foundations. How can the ex-colonists presume to interpret in their favor the principles of morals, justice, and public law when they have violated all laws, divine as well as human, when they have trampled on all principles of morality, of distributive or natural justice? The plunderers of the property of wretched Indians and profligate assassins, after having stripped us of our natural rights and by perfidy and violence torn us from the bosom of our countries, they have brought us upon this spot. We have found them to be torturers who had no pity or remorse, who inflicted on us unexampled torments, pain, and misery without necessity or provocation under the colonial system. At the call of liberty, we proved to our tyrants that the islands could be cultivated by free men and that slavery was not essential either to the master or to the slave. Order and discipline reigned everywhere. The ex-colonists were in full possession and enjoyment of what they term as their estates. That condition of things lasted for 10 years, but the ex-colonists were not satisfied. They retained no longer the power of life and death. They could no longer load us with chains at pleasure. They viewed with regret the ancient state of things and importunately demanded it. Every effort within power was made in the colony and the metropolis to compel us to resume the detested yoke of slavery, the sole and constant object of their anxious solicitations to the transitory government of France. Now, time out. In that part of the book, Vasti is referring to the time of emancipation, because before full independence was the period of emancipation, when the French government emancipated all the slaves in their colonies in response to the original revolt, the original rebellion in 1791. The French government, to put down the rebellion, they emancipated all the enslaved population in their territory, and they integrated the enslaved population and the free black population into the French military. That was from the year 1794 to about 1801. So Vasti was saying that even during the time of emancipation, the French colonists, the European colonists, that still was not enough for them. They wanted it to go back to the ancient state of things. They wanted to, like he said, make us resume the detested yoke of slavery. And that's actually the reason why Napoleon Bonaparte had sent that massive expedition during that time, the largest military expedition in the history of humanity. The main objective of that military adventure was to restore slavery, was to put everybody back in chains or genocide the whole island. That was the goal, but of course they failed. Now let's continue. The ex-colonists were the promoters of the naval expedition sent against us back in 1802. They deceived Napoleon Bonaparte and betrayed him into error by perfidious counsel, and assisting him with all their power, furnished him even with pecuniary means to accomplish that barbarous and unjust measure. They followed the expedition in crowds. They were the authors and abettors of all the crimes and cruelties that were exercised. They procured at their own expense and conducted the bloodhounds against us. They spread our unfortunate country with scaffolds, gibbets, and instruments of torture, lighted up the burning piles, and introduced death by drowning, carrier boats, and every kind of torture and crime. They destroyed by K-shot and the bayonet thousands of victims without regard to their age or their gender. European Frenchmen never could have invented or committed such horrors had they not been led and excited by the ex-colonists, who had long been familiar with crimes and hackneyed in the art of torture. They were the constant promoters of our wars and civil dissensions, on both sides, equally ready to kindle the torch of discord. Now, time out. Vasti is saying even back then, the adversary, his tactics have never changed, right? He said, constantly promoting civil dissension amongst us, constantly promoting division amongst us, right? Civil dissensions, division, playing one side against the other, playing this faction against this faction, right? And still to this day, we have individuals who still fall for their tactics. Still to this day, we still got individuals who still fall for their tactics. Anyway, let's continue. They were the constant promoters of our wars and civil dissensions, on both sides equally ready to kindle the torch of discord, inflame the passions, provoke resentments, excite to mutual slaughter, and were never so rejoiced as to when they saw the blood of Haiti shed by its own hands. 25 years of misfortune and experience could not soften the vindictive temper of the ex-colonists. Since the restoration of the Bourbons, they have not changed an iota of their unjust and savage policy. They importuned incessantly the cabinet of Louis XVIII to send an expedition against us, the imitation of Bonaparte, who complied with their entreaty. They not only recommended him to do it, but they offered again, as they had done before, pecuniary means to undertake it. At first, they sent spies, and then commissaries, all of them who were ex-colonists, to insult us by offering the alternative of slavery or death. Now, time out. You see, some things never change, man. Some things never change. Like I said before, right now, we currently have a French spy currently locked up in Bamako prison in the capital of Mali, right? The French government in the big 2025, they still sending spies to infiltrate and topple regimes. They still sending spies. Man, listen, we are listening to the ancestor who wrote this over 200 years ago. And he's telling us things that the French government is still doing still to this day. Now, of course, he's referencing, something we talked about many times before back in 1814 when the French government had sent those spies. And of course, Christophe, what'd he do to the French spy? We know what he did to the French spy. He killed him. He murdered him. Yes, let's continue. They formed plans of attack, projects of extermination, and displayed them in publications and pamphlets, of which the tendency is to violate all laws of religion, justice, morality, and humanity. In fine, they propose to exterminate our entire race to the very infant at the breast of the mother. It follows then that the ex-colonists are our natural enemies, implacable and in hatred and resentment. They were at all times our torturers and savage persecutors. For what design, however, has man been created? for the purpose surely of knowing and seeking the supreme God, his happiness and felicity, and of protecting himself from anything that might tend to endanger his safety. Self-defense is the first law of nature. It is the primary law, applicable to man either relatively or as an individual. For these reasons, we cannot and ought not to restore to the ex-colonists what they term as their estates, introduce them to our families, nor yet pay to them any sums of money under any title or pretense whatever. Safety and self-preservation imperiously demanded, and the very presence of one of these men would be sufficient to excite alarm and distress and even lose us forever. Now, time out. Now, if I would have asked Vasti one question, I would ask him, because Vasti, like we mentioned before, Vasti was a man of mixed race, but he was a very unique case, because even though as a man of mixed race, you can see that he had no sensibilities, he had no sympathies for the Europeans, right? In contrast to, a large amount of the men of mixed race in the colonies who had a tendency of leaning more towards their father's side of the family or moving towards the European side. I would ask Vasti, why was it different for you, right? Why was it different for you, where you had guys like Andre Rigaud, who was trying to pass for a white man, and he was wearing a wig on his head, trying to look like a white man. And you also, as a man of mixed race, how come you had the conviction to stand firm, stand solid 100% in the face of the adversary? And you had other guys who were trying to get in bed with the adversary, trying to link up with the adversary, or trying to, kiss the ass of the adversary. How come when it came to you, brother, like it was just like you were just all in with your brothers, man? Like, why was it different for you and not the same for the other men of mixed race? That's what I would ask Vasti, if I could have a conversation with the ancestor, because when I read Vasti's literature, man, some of the most powerful literature, man. God damn. Let's continue. Our political and moral existence, our interests are incompatible with those of the ex-colonists. After they introduce pillage, devastation, and death, after we have made exertions that have exhausted us to repair the mischief occasioned at different periods by several wars, at the moment when we begin to enjoy the fruits of our exertions, fatigue, and blood, we are expected to surrender them all to the French? Where is the unjust law by which we are condemned to divest ourselves of our privileges and our estates in order to enrich an odious race of despots and afford them an opportunity of menacing again our lives and our liberty, natural, political, and civil? Have they a right to dispossess us of everything and to overthrow the order of things established by the will of God, the laws of justice and morality? And have we no right to dispose of landed property, of a spot we have bedewed for 3 centuries with our tears, our sweat, and our blood? They were justly acquired, and the ex-colonists have been dispossessed of them forever by a long series of crimes and iniquities which rise up in judgment against them. The estates of the immigrants, according to Mr. Dubois, were legally and politically sold, but the Haitian ex-colonists are in a peculiar and favorable situation, for the proof of which he asserts that those estates are still in our hands as a trust and were never sold by any legal or illegal act of the government of Haiti. In that, as in many other instances, Mr. Dubois is under a great mistake. The estates, which the ex-colonists term as theirs, were in general sold by an authorized act of the government of His Majesty the King of Haiti. There will not, in a short space of time, remain a single insignificant house formerly inhabited by an ex-colonist that will not become the legitimate property of a native Haitian. We would not at first attempt to undeceive Mr. Dubois and his panegyrists, Mr. Fiev, Mr. Hoffman, and Mr. Follette, by showing them their egregious errors in bringing them forward the sale of the estates. With such political writers, we chose rather to discuss at once the question in regard to public rights, for the deed is not the right. We now assure them, as well as the ex-colonists and their supporters, that their estates, as they are pleased to call them, have been sold and disposed of in a strictly legal, just, and prudent manner by a solemn act presented to the king in the great council of state, and that in fact, as well as in sound principle, the estates are theirs no more. If they are sorry for it, so much the worse. They have drawn upon themselves their own misfortunes. They have to accuse themselves alone. They imagine that there was no respect paid to distributive justice on earth, but erroneously. Must they not be possessed with a spirit of infatuation and blindness to suppose that we should keep as a trust our own property and surrender it to them afterwards? Ha! My God, Vasti, man, rest in peace to the ancestor. Let's continue. If they had not considered the same ignorant and barbarous people without any knowledge of civil law or European notions, they would not have dared in our presence to appeal so inconsiderately as they have done to the principles of morality, justice, and the international law of Europe in favor of the ex-colonists. They would not have talked to us of the internal obligation of debt and the fixed rights of property when they stand upon a false and criminal basis. They would not have presumed to tell us that the ex-colonists were placed in a particular category and more favorably circumstanced than the immigrants whose estates had been legally and politically sold, because it is incumbent on wise and prudent governments before all things to prevent the recurrence of disorder and of reaction, still more dangerous. Though Mr. Dubois is guilty towards the immigrants of cruel injustice by putting them on a level with the ex-colonists, he admits, notwithstanding, that their estates were legally and politically sold. Might we not ask why the estates, which the ex-colonists term as theirs, could not be legally and politically sold? We should be desirous of being informed why such a sale would be illegal and impolitic on our part, of being informed why our government is less wise and prudent than their own, and why should we not, above all things, prevent the recurrence of disorder and of reaction, still more dangerous? If, at the period when we proclaimed our independence, we did not sell or dispose of such estates, it must be attributed to the head of the government then existing, who did not consider himself in a fit situation to do so. In that instance, he committed a capital fault, unprecedented in the annals of history, and indefensible. An act so great, salutary, and judicious would in itself have preserved the country from the horrors of civil war. The nation would have been happier, the country richer and more powerful, and the government more firm. All would have stood on a more substantial basis. The frivolous questions on property, always dangerous because they attack man in the most vital interest and have been a principal cause of civil wars, would have been avoided. The government of that time would have found in the owners of newly acquired estates a number of persons deeply interested in the maintenance and stability. 40 or 50,000 of the new proprietors would have supported it with all the influence of their wealth, character, and credit over the great body of the people. That government fell because it stood independent of the people and was grounded on no solid or permanent basis. Mr. Le Bon Dubois attributes the death of Emperor Dessalines to the slaughter of Frenchmen in his reign. At last, he says, the conspiracy succeeds. The implacable enemy of the human race is assassinated by his suite with part of his guard and the accomplices of his cruelty. Now, time out. So, in that part of the book, Vasti basically quotes the French newspapers, and apparently during that time the French media and the French journalists were celebrating the death of Dessalines, and they called him the enemy of the human race. They said Dessalines was the enemy of the human race because he killed French pedophiles and French serial killers, right? So because he handed out justice to those who were committing, crimes against humanity, the French newspaper said Dessalines was an enemy to the human race. My God. This is crazy. Let's continue. The Emperor Dessalines, though an enemy to the French, was not an enemy to the human race. Though he made reprisals upon men who would have exterminated us, he was not cruel. He owes, on the contrary, his death to having relied with too much confidence on the French faction and a white Frenchman named Verret, whom the Emperor had promoted to the rank of adjutant general, and who was base enough to give him the first stab. Now, time out. Now, Vasti says Dessalines died as a result because he placed too much confidence and trust in the French faction, right? Now, who was the French faction? The French faction was the remaining white French population, as well as their children, their sons, right? Their mixed race offspring, the Southern generals, who were the orchestrators of his murder. Now, let's continue. An ardent patriot, you talking about Dessalines, an ardent patriot, a lover of his countrymen and his country's liberty, the Emperor Dessalines, with the inclination and power to do good, had not the knowledge, the sagacity, and the prudence indispensably necessary to sovereigns in the management of public affairs. Unfortunately, he was surrounded by factious men who, to debauchery and corruption, superadded the love of intrigue. Their depravity and loose conduct lost him the favorable opinion of the people, for they were suffered to acquire an ascendancy in his councils, though incapable of understanding or promoting the welfare of the country. The very small number of honest men who could be prevailed upon to enter the cabinet were not listened to. The unhappy prince, with the very best intentions, was misled. At a period when the greatest hardship was felt, the most idle extravagances were persisted in, no useful establishments were created, no measure of common advantage was introduced, Disorders had crept into the administration. A spirit of insubordination and licentiousness spread itself among the troops. The French faction, which had been in itself the original cause of the mischief, seized the opportunity afforded by the situation in which the empire was placed to conspire against the emperor. He was basely and treacherously murdered the 17th of October, 1806, at a place called Pont Rouge, the Red Bridge, a quarter of a league distant from Port-au-Prince, without any declaration of war or previous act of hostility. The principal founder of independence, he who had expelled the French from our territory, whom they had sworn in a solemn assembly to defend to the death, perished in the midst of his fellow soldiers and companions, with only the commander of his guards. And though we feel sorrow and reluctance in tracing the lines which defile the page of our history, and had resolved never to speak of them anymore, yet we have been constrained to do so contrary to our inclination, that such an aspersion as Mr. de Boin had dared to cast on the character and the person of our august and beloved sovereign should not pass unnoticed. He has the effrontery to maintain that the king, Christophe, entered into a secret conspiracy against the Emperor Dessalines. There is too much of candor, honor, probity in the character of His Majesty. His political and private conduct stand on too firm a foundation of virtue to admit of his being wounded by so infamous a slander. His Majesty, Christophe, was deeply affected by the Emperor's misconduct and the ills that awaited our country, but he would have preferred exile or death itself to an attempt against his life. Now, time out. Now, I'm telling you, if Vasti was born in the modern day, if Vasti was alive in the modern day, man, he would have been killing. He would have been making a killing in the legal field, right? As a defense attorney, my God, listen, we're not talking about them janky defense attorneys that want to take us to court and sue us with a bunch of frivolous lawsuits. I'm talking about a real deal attorney, my boy. Listen, man, Vasti would have been a lawyer in the modern day. You see, back in the day, back then he was a warrior. He was a government official. But in the modern day, if he was born in the 21st century, Vasti would have been one of the best lawyers in the business, one of the best legal attorneys in the game. I mean, my God, the man's mastery of language, the man's mastery of vocabulary and persuasion, and just, man, God damn. Anyways, man, we could wrap up part 3 right here. Wow, what a great book, man. What a classic book, man. We having a conversation with the ancestor, man. It's like it's like we are having a drink. We sitting around the campfire and the ancestor is telling us stories, man. Anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkari Dessalines back in the Billy, yes indeed. Anyways, man, subscribe to the Patreon, NTD1814. You already know the second single of the next project, The Spy in Bamako. You already know, check it out. Pin comment at the top, link in the description, and I'm gone. Peace.
Feel like they see me, I feel like I'm Saudi or ran up on Yan in the middle of Bamako. Enemy line, they claiming they innocent. Don't do no talking, I gotta move militant. Don't do no talking, I hit them with facts. 1804, bringing it back. 1804 like I'm Mother Cap Henry. King with the vision, the crown never empty. Top of the mountain, my soldiers defend me. Ducking and dodging the fall and intelligence. Hitting my dance on the DGSE. Dodging they traps, still on my feet. Feeling impeccable, feel like I'm shining. Go to my neck and I'm flooded with diamonds. Go to my neck and I feel like a mess. Feel like a lion, I'm in the savannah. Feel like the king when I'm up in the jungle. Never defeated, I never been humble. Come out victorious every encounter. Money machine give me help when I count it. Money machine stack it up in a beat. Heart of a king and I ride for the team. Weight of the world got it stuck on my shoulders. Bet you can feel it, my heart getting colder. Yeah, gotta stay focused so when it's in shots I gotta react. Cause I'm a target, I'm under attack. Grabbing a weapon, I tell her get back. Mission exposed, secrets unfold. Enemy try but I'm still in control. Got your boy sitting in Bamako prison. Hoping they wish we sending them home. Enemy know that we good under pressure. Been through the thunderous turbulent storm. Shorty a diamond, I told her she precious. Hop in a whip and I'm taking her home. Hop in a whip and I'm swerving, I'm smashed. Killing my enemies, one of my passion. Rocking this gold like we in bikini. Feel like the captain, I'm clutching a heater. Yeah, gotta stay focused so when it's in shots I gotta react. Cause I'm a target, I'm under attack. Grabbing a weapon, I tell her get back. Mission exposed, secrets unfold. Enemy try but I'm still in control. Got your boy sitting in Bamako prison. Hoping they wish we sending them home. Enemy know that we good under pressure. Been through the thunderous turbulent storm. Shorty a diamond, I told her she precious. Hop in a whip and I'm taking her home. Hop in a whip and I'm swerving, I'm smashed. Killing my enemies, one of my passion. Rocking this gold like we in bikini. Feel like the captain, I'm clutching a heater.